All good? Great. Alrighty, thanks for having me here for another Sunday. Nice to see you all at Renegade. I've been here a couple of times and I've thought about what I wanted to say, and I belong to the 6 a.m. classes here, which is just, they're the best classes. Everyone come in the mornings. But what's happening in the mornings for me is that I do the class and then I have a lesson afterwards because I need lots of help, right? I'm a really slow learner. And Mikey teaches the 6 a.m. classes and he does my lessons, and what I'm starting to collect are little phrases that he seems to say a lot, and I figure if he repeats them a lot, they must be important, so I should take note, I should listen to them, and I'm starting to write them down. And there's this guy from China, he's dead now, but you know Mao Zedong, he was a dictator, he had a little red book with all his sayings and phrases. Well, Mikey's becoming like the little purple book of Mikey, and when he makes brown belt, I think we should just publish this little purple book of Mikey. And he says things like, never concede the sweep, right? And it's usually after I've already fallen down flat on my back. It's like, don't concede the sweep, don't give up. Or he says things like, there's always a way out, there's always a way out of that. You could get out of that. Or another good one Mikey has is, never get flat, never be flat, never be flat. Or it's a game of inches, just 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. Or you can start again next week. All of these phrases that Mikey says are starting to line up and become really important things. And so recently I've been learning a lot about half guard and trying to work a half guard game. And it's a different position for me because it's pretty close and there's not a lot of space between me and the other person, and it takes time to learn these things. And so the phrase that he's been learning and teaching me is like, you just have to trust the technique, right? You have to commit to the technique and trust the technique. And I'm sure those of you who've been around here for a week or for many, many years will have heard this phrase many, many times. And I'm sure that Mikey has inherited these phrases from other coaches here, and they've inherited them from their coaches, and these pieces of wisdom from Jiu-Jitsu have just been passed down, I imagine, from coach to coach, from gym to gym, from student to student for many, many years. And it's starting to feel a little bit like the sayings of Jesus that have been passed down from Jesus to his disciples, from his disciples to those disciples, from those disciples to those disciples, until somehow they ended up here with us, people who also love Jesus, people who are also following Jesus. And if you say them enough, surely they're important and you should commit to them and try to live them out. So one of the phrases that Jesus has used and that's coming from our scripture as Christians that's been important to me recently, one comes from Proverbs, one comes from John, and it's talking about trust. So the one from Proverbs comes from chapter 3. It's really famous. It says, in all things, trust the Lord. Don't lean on your own understandings. In all your ways, submit to him, like talk to him, and he will make your path straight. Have you heard that before? Really famous. Yeah. Another one in John, it's John 14, 1-4. It says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't freak out. Don't worry. Instead, trust in God. Trust also in me. Trust in Jesus. For in my house there are many rooms. If it weren't so, I wouldn't have told you. And I've been really thinking about those verses in the mornings when I'm here on the mat under somebody, being like, come on, just trust the technique, trust the technique. Right? If it didn't work, the coaches wouldn't tell us that it does. If it didn't work, they wouldn't put us through the drills. Right? And it's the same thing in all of our roles. I have to acknowledge that the tech will work, and I have to commit to that tech. But it's not easy. The Bible makes it sound easier than it is sometimes. And I think the church makes it sound easier than it is. And the Christians who have been doing this for year after year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, sometimes you hear these phrases so much that you just take it for granted that actually it's easier than it is. And it's not. It's hard. You know, people who practice jiu-jitsu, you know this, right? You get stuck under some guy and he's big and he's long and he's like, you know, he comes to work and work hard, and you come to learn and learn hard. And you have to think like, I'm gonna trust the technique. I'm gonna trust and commit to the technique. And there are so many reasons for me on this mat in the morning why I shouldn't do that. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's been doing this a lot longer than I have. It's scary under there. It's fast under there. It's dark under there. I'm not very strong. I don't really know what I'm doing. Rather than trust the technique, Perhaps I can just push it away. Or perhaps I can just go flat and it'll be over soon. Or perhaps I can just give up and end the round early. There are lots of reasons for me not to trust the tech. It's the same in my life, when I need to trust Jesus. Lots of reasons that might seem good at the time not to trust him. It's too hard. It's going to cost too much. I'm not brave enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm too weak. I'm too little. I'm not smart enough. I'm not married enough. I'm not male enough. Like lots of reasons in the world why trusting Jesus seems hard. It's the same when you're in jiu-jitsu and you're in a role and the tech is too hard to trust. How will this work against my circumstances that just seem so much bigger than I am? How is this going to work against something that just seems so much more thought through and better built and well put together than I am? Does that make sense to you guys? Like, can you see what's happening? But the principle is the same. No coach here would teach us a drill or teach us a technique that doesn't work. They want us to be safe practitioners. They want us to grow. They want us to develop. They want us to move from little white belts to semi-confident blue belts to, practicing helping purple belts to, and all the way along. Jesus is the same. He wouldn't ask us to trust him if he didn't know that he's a reliable source, and he is. And as Christians, we have so much evidence that trusting Jesus is a good idea. I know sometimes in the world we live in, it just seems like, what's the point in trying to trust at all? What's the point in trying God? What's the point in trying faith? What's the point in trying church? What's the point in trying love or trying forgiveness or trying hope or trying peace or trying mindfulness or trying silence or trying any of these things when everything else seems much bigger than our ability to try? But we have lots of evidence in Scripture and then in the Christian story and in Christian history to say it's worth trusting and it's worth trying, and that it's a long game with God. I can't remember which guy it is, which Martin Luther it is, but he said that the arc of Christian history is long and it is always turning towards God. It's a long, long game. And I think some sports are really short games. They require short bursts of energy that you can train for, but once that's done, it's finished. Jiu-jitsu is a game of inches. Mikey's right. And whoever told Mikey that person is also right. And whoever told that person that is also right. It is a game of inches. It's one 6 a.m. class at a time. It's one lesson at a time. It's one washing your gi at a time. That's the game. That's the sport. It's a long arc, but eventually it turns towards confidence, and it turns towards authority, and it turns towards, in my case, like assertiveness and bravery and peace and reconciliation and all these things. And in someone else's case, it bends towards competition and proficiency and excellence and wonder and proficiency and being great coaches and teaching good people and setting up great culture. But it's a long game, and there are lots of chinks in the road, but you've got to trust the tech, even when your circumstances tell you it would be easier to not try at all, to not trust at all, to tap early, to go flat, to wait for the other person to move and hope you catch them in a transition, rather than sticking to your tech and playing it out, even though it's going to take the whole 3 minutes, in my case. I think it's the same with Jesus. I think trusting him, which I would simply define as being prepared to let him have the first say before you do, being prepared to wait and listen for him before making your decisions alone. That's a long game too. And it's worth trying to trust even when it's hard, because he wouldn't ask us to do so if he didn't know it's a good idea. Does that kind of ring for you? Kind of feel sensible to you? And so I think no matter what our circumstances are, whether we're here on the mat halfway through a roll and getting really, really murdered, or whether you're the person on top, and it's actually going really well for you, there's a lot of trust you have to be exercising in that position too. Trust that the person on the bottom is going to keep going. Trust that they'll tap if they need to. Trust that you're actually going to teach this person what it means to practice well. Or whether it's that your finances are in trouble, or your relationships are broken, or your confidence is lacking, or you don't think you have it in you to start again tomorrow, or you've suffered a defeat, or you went out in a comp and they smashed you, or your kids are grumpy with you, or your marriage is falling apart. Like, we know in this gym we have lots and lots of people here, and we are all in different life stages and standards and facing different challenges, but the opportunity to trust God and trust Jesus, even if you've never had anything to do with him before, even if you've never stepped foot in a church, even if you've never come to a 2 o'clock renegade on a Sunday afternoon, even if you've never prayed, that opportunity to trust him is always there, just like the opportunity to trust your tech is always there in every role. And so I would encourage you, if you're practicing your jiu-jitsu, trust your tech. It works. If you are practicing your life and it's hard, or if it's going really well, to continue to trust God. He loves you. Trust God. He loves you. And see where it goes and see what happens. And the first few times you trust your tech, it might not work because it needs some work, you know. It might not lead you where it's meant to lead you because you haven't got it down yet. It's the same with God. Trust him. And if it doesn't work the way you think it should, perhaps you invest a little bit more in your relationship with him. Perhaps you actually spend more time with him to work out what's happening there. And you just let the opportunity to exercise trust and commit to this relationship that we're in with God take precedence over your fear or over your pain or over your doubts. And maybe you just take it 1 3-minute round, one day at a time, and seek to practice trust for a little while. Does that sound okay?